Living Power with Dan Hurst.
Have a spiritual high in your life, and things are going great, and you're just thinking, wow, this is so good, and then reality hits. You're going through, it used to happen to us all the time as kids. Remember, we'd go to camp, and we'd get so excited at camp, and wow, this is great, and things are going so good, and then we'd come home, and then reality set in, and then all of a sudden it just wasn't as exciting. In fact, if anything, it was depressing, because all of a sudden there were all these problems that you had to face. The same thing happens in our lives on a daily basis, even as Christians, when we're not on the spiritual high, but we're just seeking to obey God. We want to do things God's way. And we've made a commitment. God, I'm going to be faithful. I'm going to trust you. I'm going to do the things the way you want me to do them. And then immediately, all the opposition starts. Well, what do you do about the opposition? I love the fact that chapter 4 in Nehemiah addresses that very issue. Facing the opposition in your life. Because you are facing opposition in your life on a daily basis, especially as a Christian. And you are facing opposition in so many areas in your life. Those things that are coming against you that seem like they're about to defeat you, and you feel like you're ready to give up. It may be it may be things that are going on in your business life. It may be things that are going on in your relationships with people as friends. There may be something that's going on in your marriage. Maybe something that's going on in your relationship with your children. Things that just seem to come against the situation, and there is opposition, and you don't know what to do. Well, this is what chapter 4 deals with. And I'm not going to read all of chapter 4. You have your Bibles there. You can read it, follow along. Or you have your study guides. You can follow along in the study guides. But we are going to kick in on some of the specific verses and look at some of these principles. When you're doing God's will, when you are growing spiritually, there are going to be those who get angry and oppose you. That's just going to happen. I don't know why it seems to always happen that way, but it does. Well, I do know why it happens that way, because we're under spiritual warfare. We're always under spiritual warfare. I mean, you don't get a break. That's just the way it is as a Christian. When you're obedient to God and you're growing in the Lord, you need to expect opposition and expect conflict in your life. Now, in this chapter in Nehemiah, we see we get some understanding, some fresh understanding about how we are to deal with opposition in our lives. And I want you to notice something. The opposition comes when things are really coming together for Jerusalem. When things weren't working so well for Jerusalem, when they were just kind of floating around and they'd gotten lazy and they weren't doing the things that they were supposed to be doing, there really was no opposition. But when they started obeying God, when they started focusing in on doing what God wanted them to do, then the opposition came along. In fact, one of the reasons that they had not rebuilt the walls, one of the reasons that they were so vulnerable, because they didn't have the walls, was that they hadn't been obedient to God. Isn't it interesting that the things that had caused them to fail and be vulnerable, in other words, the fact that they had faced opposition before and threats, and then they'd gotten lazy, and then they'd gotten focused on just building their own homes and starting their own lives, and they neglected everything else. All of those things were the very reasons that they needed to finish the job. So the opposition wasn't so much against them, it was against the fact that they were being obedient to God. Now think about it. The very things that come against you in your life, boy, this is such a simple statement, but we'll miss it if we don't think it through. The things that come against you in your life that seek conflict in your spiritual growth and walk with God are the very reasons that you need to grow and walk with God. Now think this through. It's so simple that we often overlook it. When you've made a commitment to walk with God, when you've made a commitment to be obedient to the Lord, and some conflict comes in your life to challenge that, that's the very reason you need to walk with God and be obedient to Him. Now, that is not a stunning statement, but we miss it. Sometimes we give up because the opposition is just like, oh, it's just not worth it. No, the reason there is opposition confirms that it's worth it. If you're being opposed to be obedient to God and following God, then that confirms that following God is worth it. And you need to follow through on it. Opposition and conflict to your spiritual walk and your growth is a confirmation that you need to be faithful in your spiritual walk with the Lord. Opposition in your walk with the Lord is a confirmation that you need to continue walking with the Lord.